that Archangel Michael does incarnate on Earth.
Okay.
In some cases, in more than one human. In 1993, is that when my colleague passed, within about 48 hours, he began to communicate with me from the other side. I began to believe in the darkness of my bedroom in the morning and at night that he was showing me scenes of past lives. So Earl said when I was a boy growing up, sometimes I'd go outside, I'd lay on my back, I'd watch the clouds go by, and I would remember my past lives in detail.
And there are soul contracts that we have. So what's your understanding when the souls leave as young in earth years? How is that planned in advance, or is there any reason? Or
so many of my clients over a lot of years are not what I call earth-based souls, meaning souls that were created and designed to incarnate on Earth. Many of my clients have been either souls that come from somewhere outside of Earth's frequency, or what I call interplanetary souls. And people can usually, if my client is what I call an AR soul, angelic realm soul, they are someone who is just
Hi, this is Akanksha. If you're new here, please subscribe to my channel. If you resonate with me, please like, comment, and share. Welcome to Multidimensional Soul podcast and a talk show. On this show, we have with us today Dr. Linda Backman, who is a psychologist and a past life regression therapist from the US. A very warm welcome, Linda, on Multidimensional Soul podcast and a talk show. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
So can you talk about your journey from psychology to spirituality? I do know about your son, and because I know it from my own experience, after my son crossed over, he's become my spirit guide, and he actually comes in each and every podcast. So we have his presence. I do understand the grief that one has to go through, especially as a mother. So can you talk about a little bit about your journey?
Sure. And I'll try not to make it too long, Akanksha. Well, when you talk about our son, I suppose that might have begun my husband's and mine and my spiritual journey back in the 70s when our second son was born prematurely and lived a short time and passed. I didn't come to understand spirituality. It was the open door for me to understand grief and loss. I was in my 20s, so obviously it's a long time ago. And I actually wasn't a psychologist at that time. I was a speech pathologist at that stage of my life. The experience of having our second baby born prematurely and pass led me into understanding grief and loss, and basically led me to become a psychologist. I wanted to understand emotions, changes in our life, how we deal with that. But back in my 20s, I didn't understand soul, reincarnation, or any of that. And as I'm sure you know, coming from the East, for those of us most of us raised in the West, we're not raised with the notion of reincarnation. And so I wasn't until the 90s, until 1993. So about 20 years after the birth and passing of our second child, I was then a practicing psychologist. I was, for the most part, you would say a conventional psychologist, even though I did a lot of death, dying, and grief counseling. I did a lot of chronic illness, chronic pain counseling, but I didn't really understand much, if anything, about soul and reincarnation until in the spring of 1993, I was in a group practice of psychologists and psychiatrists. I had co-created that group with a colleague of mine, a man that was in his 30s. And in the spring of 1993, that colleague passed from a type of lung cancer in April of 93. And then the doors opened. And I had no sort of preliminary understanding that that would happen. But what occurred in 1993 is that when my colleague passed, within about 48 hours, he began to communicate with me from the other side. I'd never experienced that. I didn't know how it worked, but I had no doubt intuitively that I could sense his energetic presence, and I could sense communication through my own intuition, which was surprising to me. And I knew, Akanksha, I knew just a little bit about reincarnation. I'd read a couple of books, but I didn't know if I believed in it or not until he passed. And then, besides, along with that, the sense that he was communicating with me, I began to believe in the darkness of my bedroom in the morning and at night that he was showing me scenes of past lives. So I was sort of split, if you will. A part of me kept saying to myself, Linda, psychologists don't do this sort of thing. And all of your referral sources, Linda, will think you're very, very strange and a little bit, crazy, if you will. But another part of me was completely fascinated. So I decided I'd better tell my husband what was going on. My husband and I have always been progressive and liberal, but we'd never spoken about soul or reincarnation. So, and my husband knew my colleague. They at times had lunch and played golf together. So anyway, I asked my husband to sit down, and I began to explain to my husband, whose name is Earl, I began to explain to Earl that I was experiencing my colleague on the other side, and I was seeing scenes in my mind's eye of past lives with my colleague, and my colleague's nickname was Bud. And Earl looked at me very calmly on that day. And so I looked back at him and said, well, apparently you don't think this is strange. Is that correct? And Earl said, no, I really don't think it's strange. And that surprised me. So I said to Earl, why don't you think this is really kind of crazy? And my husband is not a psychologist. He spent 30 years as an academic. So my husband has a PhD in political science. And so I said to Earl, why are you so calm? And Earl said, well, he said, okay, I think I know why. He said, only now, on this day in 1993, only now do I remember something that had happened to me when I was a boy. So I said to Earl, well, what are you talking about? And Earl said, well, now I remember, but I blocked this out. And Earl and I, at this time in 93, are in our middle 40s. Earl said, when I was a boy growing up, sometimes I'd go outside. Earl grew up in the country outside a medium-sized town. He said, I'd go outside, I'd lay on my back, I'd watch the clouds go by, and I would remember my past lives in detail. And I kind of said to Earl, really? And he said, yes, now I remember this. But Earl said, I blocked it all out because no one in my life ever spoke about these kinds of things. And actually, it's interesting that I'm sharing this with you, Akanksha, because one of the things Earl said to me that day, he said, well, in particular, I remember now, and I remembered this as a boy, Earl said, I had a life as a man in India. And Earl said, even now, I can tell you the details of sort of who I was, what was happening in my life. And he said, I've never doubted reincarnation. I just forgot about it. So that, for me, in a very positive way, that was permission for me to, I was sort of split. It was like I'd sort of come to a fork in the road. And it was like, well, okay, do I just keep walking down the path of being a conventional psychologist? Or do I start studying and learning and understanding what is soul, what is reincarnation, how do we plan our lives, et cetera, et cetera? And it took me it took me a couple of years to begin to trust the direction I really wanted to head in, and that's what changed over 30 years ago.
Wow, incredible. When you talked about grief counseling, and in psychology, there is grief and loss counseling, but when you take a view from spirituality perspective, and it's way different, and because it's a soul's journey, and it continues across incarnations, and there are soul contracts that we have. So what's your understanding when the souls leave as young in earth years? How is that planned in advance, or is there any reason, or what has been your observation, and how has that helped you in working with people with grief and loss perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, Well, let me just insert, and we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. But let me just insert that for the last probably 28 to 30 years, I've been guiding regression, and I not only guide past life regression, I guide what is called between lives soul regression, which is not just the discovery of past lives, as you're probably aware, but is also working with the client at their soul level. So that's how I've learned so much about past lives and the soul. Um, well, I'll answer your question in two ways. I know some things about the reasons Earl and I needed to go through this experience of a baby, our second child born prematurely, and then I'll answer it more in a global way. I would say oftentimes, and perhaps most of the time, if we experience grief and loss, there it's purposeful, it's intentional, and there's so many different circumstances. So, in just to personalize it for a moment, um, it took me time, but I came to understand over time that the reason I and Earl and I experienced a very challenging pregnancy where I threatened to miscarry that baby for approximately 4 months, and then I delivered our second child at 26 weeks of pregnancy. Um, for me and for us, it was I mean, I know, Akanksha, I'm sure you know this. It's like coming into the human body, incarnating into the human body is how we grow and evolve.
Yeah.
And it's how we both balance karma or balance, where you come from and where you live. Karma is a very easily understood concept. It's where in current life, we have the opportunity, if we choose, to balance free will choices of past lives that need balance. And so, in part, I had the opportunity to balance. I began to understand that some of my past lives were lives where I was, you might say, self-absorbed. I was more focused on my own personal life and my own accomplishments more than my family. I have some past lives that tie to that. So I came to understand that the second baby, who we named Adam, that the soul of Adam agreed to be a stepping stone, or let me say this a little bit differently, agreed to be a potential stepping stone on my journey of soul evolution and my journey of balancing karma in current life. So how was I going to deal with the loss of a child, and how, what was I going to do with that, and was it going to lead me into permanent deep depression, or, I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities because I have worked with so many clients who've had children pass. Was it going to lead me into arguing with my husband day in and day out, or all kinds of possibilities? Fortunately, it didn't lead me to that. I went through many months of I would say, normal grief that yourself, because you've been through it as well.
Right.
I had to feel the feelings.
Yeah.
But at first, I didn't know why I felt so awful. So, long story short, Adam's passing, I came to understand, was the soul of Adam agreeing to give me the opportunity to dive in and deal with past pain, past inappropriate behavior, in order to grow and evolve. And, some people listening to what I'm saying, Akanksha, might just say, "Oh, Linda, do you really think that's true? Do you really think at the soul level we make decisions that bring us into challenging circumstances?" And I have no doubt that we do, because soul evolution is not, as we often say in English lingo, is not a walk in the park. But back in 93, when I felt so awful emotionally and physically, I wouldn't have easily had this same perspective. And then to broaden that whole notion, because obviously I've worked a lot with parents who've had a child pass, there are all kinds of explanations. We can't sort of put into one picture frame one reason why children pass, because circumstance to circumstance, each is different. So we can talk about that more. But yes, I ultimately found not only a place of peace, of peace with the passing of our second child, but then I was, and I still am, extremely passionate about working with families who've had a child pass.
Yeah. Right. In my case, I know that we had a soul contract because my son told me after he crossed over that we had a soul contract. We decided to do this for me to radically awaken. And I've had multiple awakenings in my life, but this was the most radical one.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the most radical one, yeah. You talked about karma, and we do balance karma in different lifetimes. And there is choice of free will and karma.
Mm-hmm.
Now I understand, as we are ascending, we all are moving into higher dimension.
Mm-hmm.
And some have this understanding that the karmic cycles are going to get over. We are no longer going to have any reincarnations based on karma. It will be based on dharma. So, what's your
Mm-hmm.
understanding about that?
Yeah, I mean, I love this conversation because in so many ways, your perspective is very similar to mine. So, yeah, let's talk about Dharma, because Dharma is as important an aspect of reincarnation as karma is. So, a couple of things to do my best to respond to your question. So, either when I'm training people to guide the type of regression that I do, or when I'm getting ready to work with a client, I explain what is karma and what is dharma. And of course, most people, Eastern and Western people, understand the notion of karma, but a lot of Western people may not have even heard the term dharma. So I make sure that clients understand and people taking training that they understand what Dharma is. And so my understanding is that Dharma is in each of our incarnations, what aspects of our soul intentions do we accomplish? What skills, what wisdom, what knowledge do we gain in each lifetime? And I explain to clients that when they discover a past life in the regression, the past life may show them karma in the past life. The past life may show them dharma, or it may show them both. And again, my understanding as we move from lifetime to lifetime is that in many of our past lives, we probably add on some karma, but in most of our lifetimes, we also accomplish things like being a committed parent, being an equal romantic partner, giving more than receiving. So my understanding of Dharma is just that, is that what have we learned and what have we accomplished? But then if we take that farther to, and what I'm sharing is what I've learned from years of regression. So people ask me all the time, so, okay, do we as a soul get to the point that we've accomplished enough Dharma? And my understanding is that, perfection almost doesn't exist. That and you obviously come from, and I'm sure are steeped in Eastern perspective. I'm sure you know that in Western perspective, there's a lot of notion of fear of judgment and punishment and that sort of thing, which I think sometimes is completely inappropriate and likely not valid. As we grow and evolve as a soul, and the way we do that is to keep coming into body and keep hopefully taking steps to accomplish more Dharma than karma. What we accomplish in body contributes to the evolution of our soul. Our higher self is, when we're incarnate, our higher self remains in the higher realm, and our higher self also has roles and responsibilities in the higher realm, in the spiritual realm. And we can reach a point where we can choose not to incarnate any longer, but that doesn't necessarily mean that our soul doesn't continue. Our soul does continue to have, we might say, coordination responsibilities at the higher level.
Okay. What I understand is that we take birth on Earth, and Earth is one of the most hard planets to take birth on. So, so when we take birth because our soul wants to learn something and grow and expand, and that's why we come here. But when we come here on Earth, when we get incarnated at times, and there have been many such examples where the soul gets kind of entangled. I wouldn't say trapped, but entangled in these reincarnation cycles, because the earth is designed only that way, that is, there is a veil and there is amnesia. So you forget who you are. And when you come here, and then you go on in these cycles, in these loops of birth and death, birth and death. And so you often talk about earth souls, interplanetary souls, and angelic souls. So can you talk different perspectives as to who comes here and what are these different types and what exactly happens from interplanetary perspective?
Okay, good. Yeah, great question. What's happened over the years of guiding regression is that and I usually guide the longer soul level regression multiple times a week and have for years. So it's like, how do I explain this and make it simple? Over the years, as I've guided regression, I have no, this is probably obvious to the listener, but I have no idea what the client's going to discover. I always say to people, I'm kind of like the bus driver. It's sort of like, okay, I'm seated in the, in front of the steering wheel of the regression bus, and the client gets on the bus with me. I get the engine started, I get the bus moving, and I keep the bus from sort of, falling off the road. But the itinerary of the bus, so to speak, in the client's regression, the client's going to go where they need to go. And I just make sure I keep things moving and from sort of, as I said, falling off the sides of the road. So what began to happen many years ago, I don't know, 18, 20 or more years ago, is all of a sudden I started realizing that a number of my clients, Akanksha, were in their regression, they were spontaneously going to the soul level where they come from. And some of my clients, I was learning, again, years ago, are not souls that were designed and created specifically to incarnate on Earth or to grow and evolve lifetime to lifetime to lifetime on Earth. So many of my clients over a lot of years, I've come to understand through the clients, are not what I call Earth-based souls, meaning souls that were created and designed to incarnate on Earth. Many of my clients have been either souls that come from somewhere outside of Earth's frequency, or what I call interplanetary souls. And people can exchange that term, interplanetary, with ET souls, starseed. Those words all mean the same. So some of my clients are interplanetary souls whose higher selves reside outside of Earth's frequency, either on a planet, in a star system, in what we might call non-dense interdimensional space. And at times, clients spontaneously in the regression travel to being on a spacecraft. And we learn their role on the spacecraft. We learn the purpose of the spacecraft. And then, and we can talk about it, but I'll leave the explanation out, at least for the moment. Then there's a third type of soul that can choose to come to Earth, and that is a soul from the angelic realm. And that's a soul that directly serves Source.
Okay. So, what are the main differences that you have observed in these three?
Are you saying, are you asking me like what might be the reason these souls come to Earth?
Correct.
Okay.
What are their intentions, as in, because they come from different places and their experiences may be different from individual perspective, also from collective perspective, they may be helping in different ways.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me separate it apart, and I'll talk about interplanetary souls, and then I'll talk about souls from the angelic realm. If an interplanetary soul agrees to come to Earth, and I want to be sure that listeners understand, it's a choice. It's a soul is never forced to incarnate. My understanding, a soul is never forced to incarnate on Earth. If an interplanetary, what I call an IP soul, if an IP soul comes to Earth, they come from a healthy culture somewhere in the broad celestial realm, usually from within what we humans call the solar system. And so if an IP soul agrees to come to Earth, they come from a healthy culture, and they come with advanced perspective, advanced skills, depending on where they come from, because each home location in the broad celestial realm is different, and the souls from each location have different types of skills. But if an IP soul chooses to come to Earth, they bring healthy perspective, whether it's what are healthy ways of raising children? What are healthy ways of nourishing our bodies? What are advanced technological skills? What are advanced musical skills? They come to aid humanity's, I would say, great need for evolution. And they're all different. I mean, yeah. And a lot of times people will say to me, well, Linda, do your IP souls that you work with as clients, do they come from the Pleiades? Do they come from Arcturus? You know, the sort of familiar locations that we often think about. And the answer is yes, sometimes, but not often. The IP souls I work with come from locations in the celestial realm where the name is meaningless to us, so that they're not necessarily, because people think a lot about Pleiadian souls and Arcturian souls and that sort of thing. Angelic souls are different. Angelic souls come from the group of souls that we call the angelic realm, who directly work with and carry the, you might say, the energetic signature of source. And so angelic souls carry to try to put human words to it, which is not always easy. Angelic souls carry the energy of love, compassion, non-judgment, equality. Lately, I think my guides put these words in my mind a few weeks ago: inclusivity versus exclusivity. And angelic souls serve source. The angelic realm souls that I've worked with in my practice, sometimes they are. Well, let me back up a step. Probably most people understand this. The angelic realm that serves source is coordinated by the archangels, and so the archangels are sort of the senior leaders, if you will, of the angelic realm. Some of the archangels do incarnate on Earth, some do not incarnate on Earth. But when I'll just add this piece, but usually if my client is what I call an AR soul, angelic realm soul, usually they are someone who is just very gracious, caring, accepting, supportive. It sometimes is almost powerfully surprising, the intentional, positive, caring energy that they exude.
Yeah. Have you come across any, in your cases, have you come across any archangel incarnating?
I actually have.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I connect with Archangel Michael quite a bit. So,
Okay.
which archangel was it that you have come across?
So far in my regression work, what I've discovered is that Archangel Michael does incarnate on Earth.
Okay.
In some cases, in more than one human, what we might call split
Yeah.
incarnation.
Split
Um,
incarnations, yes.
yes, exactly. And Archangel Gabriel also incarnates on Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you explain split incarnation a bit? I mean, I know personally because I have seen myself projecting consciousness across the multiverse, and that's why the name multidimensional soul. But from your experience, because you have done the regressions, so how is this split incarnation? Can you just explain it a bit?
Sure, absolutely. And I mean, again, what I love, Akanksha, is that I learn these things client to client to client to client, and I never know what I'm going to learn when I meet a client and get ready to begin a regression. So split incarnation means, and this can happen, split incarnation is most common for earth-based souls, but that's not to say that it doesn't happen for IP and AR souls at times. So split incarnation means that if people think, and it's hard to talk without using my hands, if people think about, okay, so here's, for example, okay, here's the Linda higher self. So here's my soul energy that even now, while I'm in body, my soul energy, my higher self resides in the spiritual realm. I'm an earth-based soul. I've known that for a long time. If the soul energy of your higher self is evolved, I like to talk about soul evolution on a 10-point scale. So if we think about evolution on a 10-point scale, usually a soul does not have more than one incarnation. Sort of like split incarnation means there are two people on Earth who are both aspects or portions of, so to speak, the soul energy of one higher self. And so it's kind of like, two people, for example, connected to one higher self. So then people ask me, so Linda, why does that happen? What's the purpose? And the bottom line, it's to have greater impact on humanity. It's also, in some cases, to advance the evolution of the higher self farther by, as we've talked about already today, cleaning up karma. It speeds up evolution, but split incarnation absolutely does happen. I learned that a long time ago.
Yeah. And it may happen across star systems also, because actually there's no space-time concept as we go higher, and everything is at the same time, as in everything is happening at the same time. So yeah. One thing you talked about is interplanetary souls and angelic realm souls having different, distinct purposes and intentions of being born on Earth. Why are we seeing so much of this? This was not so widely known, even I would say 10 years ago. Now it is known across light workers, star seeds, and we are going to have extraterrestrial disclosure. So, have you come across these things as to why this is happening? Why so many such souls are incarnating now on Earth? So, what's your understanding across the regressions that you've done?
Yeah. I mean, a simple but not so simple answer. So the simple answer, from my understanding, is that the higher realm that serves as a guidance system to aid Earth and souls in the higher realm, advanced souls that take on responsibilities in the higher realm, those souls either have incarnations on Earth to aid Earth, or those souls serve as guides to others. But those advanced souls in the higher realm, they can't come down here and force change. They can't come down here and change the result of an election, or change the words that come out of some human's mouth. And so it's my understanding that the higher realm is quite concerned about various aspects of what is going on with humanity, obviously on Earth, And the higher realm continues. We might say this sounds very human, but the higher realm continues to brainstorm, like, how can we resolve the exclusivity versus inclusivity, that sort of thing. And so I've heard from far more than one client that the higher realm is working hard to prepare more interplanetary souls that are experienced and angelic realm souls that are experienced, is preparing more of those souls to be able to incarnate on Earth. It is not, probably as most listeners know, it's not easy. As you said a bit ago, Earth is a challenging laboratory of learning. And so I've been told many times that currently the higher realm is wanting to prepare more IPs and more ARs, as well as have more experienced Earth based souls come to Earth to do what they can to advance our human culture.
Thank you for tuning in from wherever you are in the world. As Ramdas says, that we are just walking each other home. So thank you for co-creating the new earth along with me and my guests. If you resonate with me, subscribe to my channel, like, comment, and share. Let's keep this beautiful energy in flow, in motion. Namaste. Lots of love.